everybody, and welcome to the microcosm at Micro Odysseys. Here, I design real art concepts from idea to creation through stories, colors, sounds, lights, whatever else comes to mind. Think of these concepts that I'm creating as portals into insular worlds, where each microverse is its own standalone space, meant to encourage you to tell your own story, or just follow along with mine. In season one, we are developing our first microverse, a jungle themed story and art installation that harkens back to the tiki rooms and exotic adventure serials of the mid 20th century. Seems like a lot, but bear with me, we'll get through it. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and we have video options available on both Spotify and YouTube. Just search for Micro Odysseys in your favorite podcast or video provider, and we should be one of your top hits. So join me as we step through this portal on another episode of Micro Odysseys. Last week, currently we're first building our first microverse, an art installation, filled with a whole bunch of jungle stuff. Right now, we've completed absolutely nothing so far, but we have done our preliminary documents, so that's good, telling us what, when, why, how, and we're building everything. Besides that, the world is our oyster. We're currently working on writing our book, completing a few pieces of material art, and those are our overall projects we're currently working on. However, it's come to my attention that this podcast might be a little too broad. We might be trying to do too much. So I think I'm going to be thinking about splitting stuff up into its own kind of formats, not focusing on everything here. And, we'll get back to that at the end of the episode. But that's okay. I still plan on working on all the phases of the project and letting you guys all know, through that, how it's going. But yeah, as part of this podcast, we're now working on our 3-act story, and that's going to morph into a theme chart, character chart, settings chart, story chart, and that will morph into our first draft of our actual book. We'll have actual chapters being written, but before we do that, got to come up with the story. So you might see our segments change during this episode, but that should be fine given that we only had, I think, 3 listeners last week. So hopefully you 3 bear with us. But that leads us to our first segment, Whispers from the Microcosm. Whispers from the Microcosm is my segment where we go over anybody who has mailed us in, anybody who, it's going to write in how they're doing, that kind of a thing. And so far, our weekly write-in streak is at 3 weeks of no write-ins. So guys, please email me microodysseys@gmail.com if you want to be on air talking about how you're doing, anything you're working on, any comments or feedback on the pod. Let me know. But how am I doing? I'm doing great. I got a new little workout plan going, leading me into spring and summer. I'm starting to do some lap swimming, starting to do some rock climbing, which I'm really getting into. And I think my main focus is I'm realizing if you want to get stuff done in your life, you have to wake up early. It's like the best life hack, guys. I was waking up at like 7 a.m. before. You got to go earlier. There's just so much stuff. I like to have long mornings. Trying to learn French right now because my honeymoon's going to be in France, and I'm trying to work on this project, And so the best way to do that, wake up early. I'm down to like 6:30, trying to work it down to 6 a.m. It's the best time of the day to get stuff done, without feeling rushed or like you've ruined your day. So yeah, and I've employed some interesting methods of waking up early too. Got this thing called Brick. It's this physical brick that when you tap your phone to it, it shuts off all these distracting apps, so you don't wake up in the middle or in the morning and just focus on Instagram or Reddit or dumb stuff. You have nothing to look at. I also got a physical alarm clock and put it in my living room, so I have to physically get out of bed in order to wake up. That just gets you right up. It's great. You get right up, you go make your coffee, kind of I take care of like my dog's bowl, get his water, kind of take care of him a little, that kind of a thing. So it's been working out really well. And waking up early, guys, give it a try. But um, that being said, that's how I'm doing. And now let's take a look at our podcast from the 30,000-foot level from our view from the crow's nest. Welcome to the View from the Crow's Nest. This is where we're actually going to continue talking about the project as a whole, but just leave it at this segment. And past this, we're only going to be talking about writing a story. But for now, we can talk about that. I started my drawing channel on YouTube. Right now, it's called The Weekly Voyage, kind of based on this, but I think I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it to Drawing, and that's gonna have a few different things. It can be Drawing California, Drawing the World, Drawing Disney, because I'm gonna be drawing a bunch of stuff from Disney as a kind of an artistic, obviously foundation, like what we talked about in our last episode. But I've been taking my drawing class recently. We learned how to draw little Mario mushrooms, which has been pretty cool. Here they are. Some of these are really bad, but that's okay because this is just supposed to be like a little warm up. Warm your hand up, draw some circles, get the blood flowing in your hand. So, and it's just fun. It's kind of a fun thing. And I mentor this little kid who loves Mario, so I'm going to show him how to do that too. So it was pretty cool. But you can see in my video that'll come out same day as this. I did a new drawing, but I'll show you guys here, and it's this lamppost that I found on Main Street in Disneyland last week. And I think it looks pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about the way I drew it. Some of the lighting could probably be done a little better, but we'll go over that in that video. But yeah, that's going well. My 3-act story is coming along. At least Act 1 is so far. Got some ideas for that, but we'll go over that in the Secret Explorer log. So yeah, thank you for joining me. View from the Crow's Nest. So far, the project is chugging along. But that being said, we're going to dive a little deeper into the story as we tear out a page of our Secret Explorer log. Welcome to the Secret Explorer log. This is where I read stuff from my journal or take inspiration from my secret diary that I've been writing my ideas for the story in. But yeah, Secret Explorer log. I have something queued up for you guys today. Last week in our recap, we went over how Disneyland played a huge role in laying kind of a foundation of the flow of our story. We still need to split that up into acts, Act 1, 2, and 3, and get our character motivations in it. But we have a general flow, I think, of how it's going to go. At least from the Disneyland perspective. Today, we're going to be focused on mapping that Disneyland perspective into what the story will actually look like, right? So if you'll recall, we started our story at Disneyland at Trader Sam's because we're trying to go through a great dinner, drinks, appetizers, entree, dessert. And Trader Sam's at the hotel at the Disneyland Resort. If you guys have never been, if you guys are going to Disney next, I highly recommend it. You don't even need to have a ticket to get there. You can just roll in, probably wait, I would guess 30, 40 minutes for a table, but it's one of the coolest tiki bars in the world, so I've heard. But that's where our story starts. We're going to start outside the resort or outside the parks at Trader Sam's. That's kind of the beginning foundation. And going from there, you have to walk through the downtown Disney shopping area, kind of like to end up at the front gate of Disneyland. So that means that in our story, our tiki bar would be in some sort of downtown area, and our character would be led to a smaller, kind of maybe Main Street-esque type town, because we would end up on Main Street, USA while we're at Disneyland. So since Main Street, USA is inspired by a town in Missouri, I'm thinking that the tiki bar that our main character starts his story in might be in St. Louis, Missouri. And that's perfect because he can take, I think the Missouri River, possibly the Mississippi runs through St. Louis. I don't remember. I have to check that. And ends up at New Orleans, which we will eventually end up in our story. What I really like about St. Louis is that it's a city that has a ton of American history attached to it. I mean, Lewis and Clark went through there. The World's Fair was hosted there. For a long time at the turn of the century, St. Louis as a city was vying to be the center of American society, center of American innovation, and it was going to be the hope of the future of our nation. If you guys haven't checked it out, there's a cool 50s era movie called Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland. It's you've probably heard of it. It's one of the most famous movies of all time. But it really encapsulates that feeling of hope that people had about that city at that time. Um, and just how, I mean, it was one of the first fully lit, electrically lit American towns. It had the infrastructure for the World's Fair. It was supposed to mark kind of like America's turning point into the turn of the century. But yeah, I highly recommend watching that movie. And there's just a lot to that city. There's a ton of history. But anyway, at Disneyland, once we get to Main Street, we're going to be taking the train at the Main Street station to New Orleans Square. And that's a pretty easy parallel for my story. Our character will literally just be taking a train from Missouri to New Orleans to be in the port city. Here's where I have the biggest hangup in both sides, the Disneyland story that we're creating and then relating that to mine, is do we just go directly from New Orleans Square Station to Adventureland? I mean, it's kind of pretty easy walk. It's a little abrupt, I guess. But here's the other idea for our story. Maybe we do the train to New Orleans Square Station, do Pirates, because it's right there. And then Pirates is a pretty natural transition between New Orleans, the port city that you enter the boat in, and then you end up in the Caribbean, in that literally in the Caribbean in the ride. Even though it spits you out of New Orleans, it spits you out right kind of at the entrance of Adventureland. So you can kind of just pretend maybe you've ended up there. But I mean, it's exactly what our character's probably going to do anyway. He's going to take a boat from the port city into the Caribbean. I think what that means for my story is that's how that's going to go. But um, I think the pirate thing is just going to kind of be more of like it's not going to be like he runs into a gang of pirates, because this story is probably going to take place in the 60s. Probably not too many pirates, but he might run into some pirate history, some weird pirate artifacts. You never know. I basically don't want this whole pirates part, because pirates does feel like an entree also, but we haven't even gone to the appetizer yet of our story. So I think I'm going to just use the essence of pirates a little bit. Maybe we'll have like a character that's kind of pirate adjacent. We'll see, but I don't want it to dilute the flow of the story too much. Maybe he could like our character could like charter a boat captain that's living in an old pirate lair in the swamps or the bayou or something like that, which isn't a half bad idea. If you've ever been to New Orleans, there's just endless swamps, and they say that that's how pirates used to get around. No one knew the route they took to get into New Orleans to kind of sell stuff on the black market, but because there were so many swamps, and there's some undiscovered swampland kind of in those bayous still that maybe our character could run into. But I want you guys to let me know what you think our story should do. Should we go through a little pirate-esque storyline to get to the Caribbean? Or should he be meeting some sort of salty boat captain? Or should he just go directly to the tropical location, not focus on it too much? Write into me, microodysseys@gmail.com. If you guys don't write in, I'm gonna go over this in a little bit. I'll be consulting the Oracle if you guys don't help me collaborate on the story. So don't leave my story into the hands of AI. Write in, dude. Let's work together. Anyway, once our characters are in our hidden tropical location, they'll need to find the hidden treasure or whatever they're looking for. And in order to do this, they'll have to take a boat ride upriver with a specific navigator and guide who can lead them to what they seek. Clearly, that's the Jungle Cruise, right? That's what we're going to use that for. But they're going to be seeking a hidden temple housing a legendary room This should cover the Jungle Cruise, lead up to the Enchanted Tiki Room, possibly the facade of Indy, but we're not going to be incorporating too many Indiana Jones elements in there. But once you're in the Enchanted Tiki Room, they will learn of its mystical power and why it has eluded explorers for so long. That I don't have a clear picture of how that's going to work yet, but that's going to be kind of like the climax of the story. And once the climax of the story, we're going to need a resolution. The resolution, I think they'll probably get a Dole Whip, walk back to the parking lot. No, in all seriousness, I think we have a pretty good framework of to write our 3 act story. Character starting in St. Louis at a tiki bar, taking the train down to New Orleans, has to find some information out, charter a boat into the Caribbean, where he has to then navigate up this tropical, upstream into this tropical river to find the temple with the enchanted jungle room, which is going to have some sort of priceless artifact or mystical power associated with it. We will find that out. Hold on. Sorry, there's a loud humming coming from outside somewhere, but that's okay. Anyway, now that we have all that, we're going to work on our character developments, motivations, establishing the basic plot, developing the settings. Once we were going to massage all that, we can put it all together in a big story chart. We'll be able to mix it all together, start polishing it, something we can actually write. So thank you for joining me for the Secret Explorer log, where we're building out our basic framework from the story based upon our information and our user story that we have going to Disneyland. But now that we have done that, we're going to set off on our weekly voyage. Thank you for joining me for the weekly voyage. Unfortunately, the weekly voyage is probably going to be discontinued from this podcast. Instead, I think we're going to be looking forward toward making sure we record anything for future phases of our book to use. So right now, obviously, we're working on our story structure, but phase 2, we're going to be working on our themes, characters, and settings. And so right now, I think I'm going to have a segment, kind of like a future site segment, where we can just be writing down, taking notes of stuff we think up for our characters, settings, etc. We already have a few settings, right? We have St. Louis, Missouri as a whole. We have New Orleans. We have the Caribbean. We can leave it at that for now. That's all we need for now. We don't have any themes yet, but we'll get into that. I'll have an artifact of the week that kind of we can derive a couple themes off of. Then we have our characters. We don't have any characters yet. We have a ethereal main character, right? Well, let's think about a character. I want to introduce you to who I think will be my main character, and I think he's going to be an adventurer named John. I like John Reardon. I mean, I need like a strong name, dude. He wants to be like a macho. He needs to be like a macho, like no nonsense guy, John Reardon. I want him to kind of be like an Indiana Jones type character, but maybe even more of a tough guy persona. Not so much of an academic, but just as dedicated to his job. A character that I wouldn't mind using over and over in future microverse stories that we're going to have. Story after story, he's the guy who will be exploring our jungles. He's going to be taking daring trips across the sea. He's motivated. He's driven. He's going to be discovering untold mysteries, and he's going to be able to mentally handle that somehow. I don't know if we came across some world-bending stuff, how well we'd handle it, but he will. And I'm trying to think, he needs like a badass profession, right? Like Indiana Jones, archaeologist. That's so badass, right? And it drives the story. I think for him, dude, he's the tough guy. He's going to be a veteran, A, and I think B, he's going to be a journalist. Journalism is a badass profession, dude. Maybe not in the modern day, but when this was, because modern day journalists are kind of, no one likes the media right now. I don't care what side you're on. The media, it's flaky. They've turned journalism into like, ugh. It gives me the ick. I'm sure it gives you the ick too, because it gives everyone the ick. journalism's kind of dead, you know. But back in the day, I mean, people have been talking mad crap about journalists for forever, you know. But you know, like the idea of like a journalist like in the 20th century was like he's dedicated, he puts his life on the line for the story, you know, like he's being threatened, he's unwavering, you know what I mean? And think about like a war correspondent or something like that. Like maybe he's like a 1960s former war correspondent. He's grizzled, dude. He's experienced, he's seasoned. He's able to look at a situation and just infer what's going down here. You know what I mean? Journalism, being a journalist, at least in our little fantasy microverse, badass profession. And John Reardon, I think that's going to be where he's coming from, you know. And I think he might even be jaded from that. He could be chilling at this tiki bar just night after night, just popping drinks, just um, completely jaded with life, listless. I think he's going to start off listless, like he's seen something that traumatized him. Maybe we can add that to the theme document, by the way. Um, what would that theme be? Kind of like using adventure to like cure trauma. Not cure, but little therapy, adventure therapy. Keep that word in mind, adventure therapy. That's a good one. I'm going to use that. But yeah, journalist, badass. You know what I mean? So I'm going to write that down. And right now, I'm just going to be writing these ideas down in my little log for each themes, characters, settings. We're not actually going to work with them. We're just going to note them for now. And that's what this segment will be about, noting them. Cool. So now that we have our weekly voyage, which I'll be changing the name of next week, we will now move on to our artifact of the week. Welcome to the artifact of the week. This is where I pretty much tell you about something that is kind of a cool adjacent, either inspiration, something that's going to be in my little artifact registry, something cool that could be part of the project or it could just be an inspiration. Not really sure. But in this one, I'm going to be going over artifact number. Wait, which one? 44. I think I meant 43. The Disneyland Show wiki page. The Disneyland Show was something that Walt Disney came up with in like the 50s before Disneyland even opened to get people hyped on Disneyland so that people would show up. And it completely worked. And also, he used it to sell ad space to make money to bankroll the construction of Disneyland. But this show is pretty awesome. In the first few seasons, let's see if there is an episode list. Disneyland Show episode list wiki. Yeah, check it out. The first few seasons, I want to say like the first 7 seasons, were broken down into Frontierland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, and Fantasyland. And so, yeah, we're going to be just going through the Adventureland ones. I highly recommend checking these out. They're all on YouTube. It turns out that this show has been running for like 50 years in different formats, but we're going to just focus on like the first 7 seasons where they were broken down into the lands of Disneyland. Obviously, our project is Adventureland focused right now. So we're only going to be watching the Adventureland episodes. But every single one of these episodes starts out with Walt Disney in his like office above the fire station at Disneyland, kind of giving an intro. And he's wearing his suit and he's talking about kind of like what's the origin of the episode, why are we doing it, when was it filmed, is it a true life? Most of the Adventureland ones are true life adventures, which are like nature documentaries. So I want to use this. I want to have a character in my story, possibly even one of the MacGuffins that's like a motivating story driver of a found footage, and I've talked about this, a found footage reel that changes kind of the landscape of the story. Maybe our characters find this found footage reel and they're like, whoa, what is that? They find out, or maybe there's a bad guy looking for it and he needs the information from the reel, and it's being like narrated and hosted by a Walt Disney-esque kind of a guy who is integral to the story somehow. We will find out later, but so far, I mean, I highly recommend on YouTube. I'll even link the playlist in the description. Somebody has uploaded like every episode of this show, and it's just really fun to watch. There's also really funny 1950s era advertisements with like really outdated depictions of like the housewife and how children are raised, and just the products they would advertise and the different vehicles in the ads were very, very cool to see. It's like a total time capsule of the era. But yeah, you'll see from 1954 to 1958, Walt Disney hosted this himself, broke it down into all of the, um, lands of Disneyland. Some of these episodes were just, edited 1 hour cuts of Disney movies. Some of them were, I mean, the Davy Crockett that we know and love came out of this. It was from this show. Um, they would have silly symphonies. They would just have a ton of stuff. And I highly recommend kind of researching and checking it out. I mean, it looks like Ronald Reagan was even in this show, but I think Walt Disney was like one of the first guys to really embrace TV. And he saw it as an opportunity to broadcast advertisement for his park, which completely worked. As you can see, it's gone through multiple iterations. Walt Disney's Disneyland, Walt Disney Presents, Walt Disney's Wonderful Wonderful World of Color, The Wonderful World of Disney, Disney's Wonderful World, Walt Disney. And I mean, it continued on after he died too, right? The Disney Sunday Movie, The Magical World of Disney, The Wonderful World of Disney again. And looks like they even have it going now. I didn't even know that on Disney Plus. It's on 2015 to present. I guess you can check it out. It's still going strong. It's been going for almost 70 years now, which is wild. But check out this wiki page. Check out an episode. I don't know if I'm allowed to post an episode here because of like YouTube copyright. I'm really not sure, but that's okay. You guys can check it out. It's just the idea of it I want to use for now. So it kind of goes into, this is going to be the framework for me getting that found footage. And kind of like it's going to be a theme. It's kind of like the nature documentary, how that plays in. How does like media play in to kind of our overall story? And I think it will pretty nicely. So yeah, that is the artifact of the week. And I'm going to be delving in as part of other artifacts of the week into like other episodes, specific episodes of the show. I even bought like a DVD copy of like a lot of the episodes, so we can kind of dive into that. That being said, that leads us into our next segment, Consult the Oracle. Welcome to Consult the Oracle. This is where we consult generative AI to figure out things we can't figure out. Little details we don't want to think about. It's too much brain power. Little suggestions we would never would have come up with on our own. We've entered the temple. We're in there now. But before we go further into the deep recesses of the temple, I wanted to let you guys know I've decided to change the format of this segment. This segment used to just be me screen sharing Google Gemini and asking random stuff. But I want a collaborative point of view from this from here on out. And that comes from you, the viewer, the listener. I've shared my email with you before, microodysseys@gmail.com. And before we consult the Oracle, waste her time, valuable CPU, I think I'm going to leave a week for every question to have you guys write in. Let me know if you have a suggestion, and I'll be reading them live on the air. And if they're bad, I will consult the Oracle. Or if they're not relevant, or if I just think we should do something different. Or if nobody writes in. This is to encourage you to write in microodysseys@gmail.com. Write in. And for now, we already have one question. How piratey should we go with our story? Should we even go to pirates as part of our story? Will pirates be involved, and what is the extent of them? Write in your thoughts on the pirates. Does it dilute the story? Do you think it's badass and should be included? I'm leaning that way. Let me know your thoughts. If I don't hear from anyone, I'll be consulting the Oracle. The second question. It's clear that our character, John Reardon, the war-grizzled journalist, will be imbibing adult beverages at the beginning of our story as he's in the tiki bar. But then, the question is, what is John Reardon's signature beverage? I already have some ideas. One great idea in particular. But I want to hear what you guys think. A war-grizzled veteran at a tiki bar, what will his signature beverage be? I would say the tough guy archetype that we're going for usually should have a rigid pattern that he follows his life through. Something that's unchanging and unshakable, much like James Bond with the martini shaken, not stirred, and later on the Heineken, which I don't accept. John Reardon will be no different. He will have a signature beverage. And if he's somewhere where he can't get that signature beverage, he will scoff. You don't have whatever, XYZ. Go ahead and write into microodysseys@gmail.com with what you think John Reardon's signature beverage should be. Suggest to me what it is. Otherwise, either I will come up with it or I will consult the Oracle next week. I think regardless, I will consult the Oracle. If I don't like what she has to say, I'll go with my idea. I think my idea is pretty good, but I don't want it to influence your suggestion. Go ahead and write in microodysseys@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me for my newest part of the segment, Consulting. The new changes we have for it. So that leads me to my final thoughts. My final thoughts on this episode is, even though we just went through this whole episode, I've kind of changed the format of the show. This podcast will probably only focus on the story for now and writing the book. Maybe even change the name and the tagline. Our adventure will now be about writing a book. I must say, I've actually contemplated folding this podcast altogether and not continuing with it. And I think it's because this is just a topic that I don't think is easily podcastable. It doesn't necessarily always spark a discussion. It's not easy to get into. And I think I've learned something about podcasting. And that thing that I've learned is that you need a hook. You need something people are already interested in order to actually have a podcast that is interesting. That can include, if you are already well known for another podcast, you might be the interesting thing that people tune in for. I don't have that. I don't really have that thing that's interesting that people can tune in for. That's not me yet. Maybe I will eventually. But I think my art project is what I learned. My art project is not something that people already have a preconceived interest in. People might have a preconceived interest in writing a book and following somebody as they go through the process of writing one. But even that is not a hook that I think, it's not a very strong hook to get people in. And so I'm thinking I might fold the podcast here. My goal was to get 5 episodes done because the average podcast lasts 5 episodes. Does this mean I might not start another podcast? No, I actually this has been really fun. And I just think you need something that has a hook. You need something that's already interesting. My art concept is something that's very hard to explain to people. And if something's hard to explain, it's hard to put into an intro. It's hard to hook new people. It's hard to listen to. And I think people aren't going to tune in or enjoy something that's hard to listen to. That being said, I am definitely going to continue on my drawing YouTube channel. might just be called Drawn, because that does have a conceived hook that someone's interested in. I think I'm going to probably keep it Disney themed, because Disney is something that people love. People are obsessed. They want to consume every possible piece of media associated with it. People log on every day to watch multiple streamers walk through the park, which is kind of sad, but kind of cool. I know some people that do that. I've done it just to see what it is, what these people are like. I've seen them in the park, but they make money. These people have filled in this insane crack niche of society and capitalism, where they are just soullessly walking around, live streaming them going through little rides so that people at their desk can feel an escapism. Once again, people love escapism. That's what this whole podcast was about. But if I keep it Drawn Disney or Drawn at Disney, people will buy into that. People want to see, oh, what is, and then I'm just making art there. People, I think, will watch that. It has that hook. And it's focused. It's a lot more focused than this podcast. This podcast lacked focus. And while I tried to narrow it down over time, and I think I did that, it still is just too broad. There's not cookie cutter topics that you can ramble on about week after week. I think this book, which I'm still going to work on my story, my book, go through all my phases of my podcast or of my project. I think it's something I need to just be working on behind the scenes. I think at the end of the day, we've talked about class A, B, and C things. This is a class C project where I don't think the world needs to see everything that goes on behind the scenes. Drawn Disney, though, it's a great way for me to learn how to draw people in, get people excited, further market my art project, catapult that into my own concept art I'll eventually be drawing. And yeah, so I hate to say it, but this podcast may be no more. And I'm sorry to my listeners. You know what? If anybody wants to write in, microodysseys@gmail.com, tell me that they don't want me to stop, I'll keep going. But I doubt anyone will do that. But feel free. That'd be cool. But make sure you write in. Tell me how you're doing in the meantime, so we can maybe break the streak. But yeah, I think this might be over, guys. But I learned a lot. I learned what it takes to start a podcast. I learned all the different tools involved. I learned what it takes to just kind of improve week to week. I've learned about audio interfaces that I want to get that, I knew I wasn't going to get because I knew I probably wasn't going to continue this podcast for very long. I've learned about how to make little thumbnails for your videos, how to make a logo, how to make a segment, how to make audio, kind of like the soundboard for the segments. I learned how to come up with a good idea. I think a more cookie cutter idea that you could ramble on week after week. People don't want to hear that. But don't be surprised if this is the last episode that you hear from me. I promise you guys, if I do hear from you, I will make another episode. But if I don't, I think I'm probably going to fold it in. Honestly, I came up with this conclusion when I was watching the Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie the other night, and I was just sitting there thinking, like, I don't know what came over me, but I realized that this might just be a waste of time, might just be a waste of energy, might be a waste of words. And I might just want to work on my project kind of by myself and come out with it when I come out with it. I don't know, something about Taylor Swift really spoke to me that night. Kind of came up with this revelation that it's probably not a good thing overall for like motivation for my project to just be kind of talking into the wind at nobody, So that's okay, because I'll come up with another podcast soon, and I might even make an episode about this again, reviving it, so you guys can tune into that if you want. But that being said, this might be the final sign off, you guys. So if you don't hear from me, have a good life. Work on your art projects. You could still email me at microodysseys@gmail.com if you want to show off your art project. I'll find other ways to kind of get my word out there about my art project as I kind of finish it, as I kind of go through it. But in the meantime, guys, might be the final sign off. Have a good life. Have some good projects. Have some good escapism, you guys. And Write some good stories for me. How about that? And you'll be hearing from me sooner or later with what I've done. So, okay. Thank you very much. Bye bye.